What's up guys, I'm Phoenix Master 1 and welcome to my refined review and builds guide for Legendary Fae, Legendary Micaiah, Ronan, Halloween Xane, Sonia, Selena, and Lex. Let us begin with Legendary Fae, who is one of the big winners of this batch. So Dazzling Breath was always a pretty generic weapon, but now it is a lot better and is also supportive surprisingly. So Dazzling Breath did give her +3 speed and also has the guard effect, and now it has the dull Omni -5 rain effect on foes that are in 3 rows and 3 columns centered on her. And I say the rain effect because this is going to be the in-combat debuff, and the fact that this is the dull all effect is extremely helpful if you use Fae in Arena, and in any kind of game mode this kind of dull all effect is always invaluable because nowadays we have so many visible buffs. A lot of units already have visible buffs turned on with their weapon and they also give that out to their allies. So this is going to be fantastic support that she can give out, and she also gets -10 debuff to all of the stats of the foe in the combat with this weapon refine. She also had the follow-up denial, and it is still useful now because not a lot of modern units come with null follow-up in their kit. So this follow-up denial at times can help you survive and not get doubled. She now has got the true damage based on 20% of her resistance, which is going to be helping with the damage reflection of her special to do a lot of damage, and she has got the bulwark effect built in, so she doesn't need to run any kind of spiked wall skill. She is going to be able to obstruct the enemies and prevent them from sniping your backline units, and this makes her a really good frontliner as she is going to be one of the better tanks in the game. And then she also gets the much needed flat damage reduction based on 20% of her resistance. Unfortunately, this is not going to be applied to the AoE specials, but still this kind of flat damage reduction along with Lagu's friend is going to be making her extremely bulky. And then finally she has got the scowl effect built in this weapon, so even if you don't run a scowl skill in the slot A, you can still get this effect out of her weapon itself. And overall this weapon refine is pretty good, but her remix is insane. So Life Unending 2 has got the -5 cooldown quick and pulse effect. It does have the miracle, and whenever that miracle triggers, you're going to be healing up 99 HP after the trigger. And now with the remix, it completely nullifies the deep wounds effect, so you're going to be healing up no matter what. And this is kind of reminiscent of Divine Nectar because that is the only effect that is also completely immune to deep wounds. And then this is going to be having a cooldown, so it is not going to be triggering again for 2 turns, which is much better than what it used to be before, which was once per map. So this is a huge upgrade. And then she also gets 40% damage reduction on foes first attacks, including the brave hits. And because this is the damage reduction in the special, this is unpierceable damage reduction. Any kind of damage reduction in the special, if it's not stated like Vital Astra that it's pierceable, then assume that it is going to be unpierceable. So that also helps her tank. And then she has got damage reflection. So this makes her damage output much better because she has got a miracle special and she's able to survive things and reflect back the damage, and that does so much damage that she is going to be scary with this kind of special. And there's nothing really you can do about the special. This doesn't get affected by the null miracle status or fatal smoke, and the only type of effect which is going to be bypassing this is Legendary Nana, or if they release units similar to that. So yeah, gonna be waiting for Legendary Nana's weapon refine so that you could get past the miracle of this chicken. And the damage reflection that Fae has got does stack with any kind of other damage reduction that you're going to be having. So it is not a limited damage reflection like Calic or Petrine's weapon refine, and you can easily run a lot of skills that can give you the damage reduction, and then you can reflect back the damage. So this is an extremely good weapon refine and remix that makes Legendary Fae into a really unique tank who can function on the front line because of the bulwark effect, and it takes full advantage of her stat spread. And it also gives support with the dull all effect, so that is going to be helpful in every single game mode. And the fact that she has got miracle, which can heal her up by so much, which is not affected by deep wounds, does make it so that she is going to be a very annoying unit to face, as she is going to be able to survive and then she does a lot of damage because of her damage reflection. So even on a budget, she is gonna be a really fantastic tank, and if you have some investment on her, then she is gonna be really solid even now. So if you're gonna be building her up on a budget, then she does have dragon scales as a remix scale now. So this can give you the guaranteed follow-up attack and can give you up to -11 debuffs. And it also gives you the 50% damage reduction piercing and the -1 special cooldown jump. So the damage reduction piercing is helpful, and she already has the scowl effect in her weapon, so you could keep distance stance and also the menace scale unless you have some other options. And you could just run Emblem Ike Ring for more unpierceable damage reduction on her. And squad a Sacred Seal that can boost up her defense and resistance is always helpful for just being tanky, and Resistance Boon is something you should be going for. And if you're going to be ascending an asset, then I would just pick the defense super boon that she has got. And if you don't have Lagoose Friend to give to her, then you could maybe fodder off your Brave Alphonse, because reopening can work with Legendary Fae because she doesn't have guaranteed follow-up attack in her weapon. So she takes full advantage of reopening's flat damage reduction based on her defense. And you could also run fortifications so that you could set up your own stone terrain with the Emblem Sacred Ring or Emblem Celica Ring. And Breath of Life 4 also helps Fae a lot because she does have high defense to scale off it. And getting its healing is also helpful against the AoE specials, which you could definitely try and tank when she increases her visible defense and resistance with fortifications. And if you did get her with Lagoose Friend in the Hall of Forms, then you could still run that build. There is going to be double scowl with defense res scowl and her weapon, and I don't think it's that big of a deal because now we do have a lot of special jumping, so double scowl is not the worst thing to have for the overlap. And Lagoose Friend is by far her best slot B skill because it gives her a lot of flat damage reduction and true damage, and unlike reopening, it also gives her the full damage reduction piercing. So this is going to be perfect for her. She is going to be missing out on the guaranteed follow-up attack of dragon scales, so you could just run any kind of ally who can give you the crux effect, and then she can double. And you could just run distant counter dragon as the Sacred Seal if you're going to be running a scowl scale in the slot A. And you could also run this build to optimize her. So you could run distant bonus doubler, which means that you free up your Sacred Seal to run Hardy Bearing, and that way you can just stop the desperation nukes like Emblem Lin, for example, Brave Bernie. And you could also run Barricade because it is going to be having the warp blocking, and it also gives you and the allies the defense and resistance debuff neutralization. So that is really good with Legendary Fae for the defensive effect, for providing more utility, and she already has the bulwark effect. So just combining Barricade and Lagoose Friend makes her a fantastic frontliner at this kind of max investment. And if you're going to be running her in Arena, then she is going to be needing High Dragon Wall. I know High Dragon Wall kind of pales in comparison to Barricade, but still it is the only 400 SP slot B skill, so you gotta run it for the optimal scoring. And you could just run Breath of Life 4, it is still really good in Arena for giving that support to your allies, and her dull alt support is going to be really helpful in Arena. You could also run Stronghold now on her if you're not going to be wanting to run the other slotty options which I showed before. Obviously, you're not going to be running Distant Bonus Doubler here, as you need to run Distant Counter Dragon Sacred Seal for the scoring. So Stronghold can get rid of the debuffs and also get rid of the panic, which can help her tank better. You could also run Double Scowl if you want to, and for an older unit, she still scores really well with the tools that she has got. And then finally, in Summoner Duels, you could try and run her with Barricade. So again, combining Bulwark and Barricade in a single unit makes for a really good frontliner, and then she provides even more support with her weapon. So you could run Fortifications so that you could set up these stone tiles with the Sigurd Ring, and she's mainly going to be a melee tank, as you need to carry a Far Savior to protect yourself against the Lin Ring users. So they're going to be taking the hits anyways. And you could even run some other slotty skills, but I do like Fortifications for the visible defense and resistance it can give. So it does help you tank the AoE specials better, and she needs to have the Breath of Life or Divine Nectar support from Duo Hathrin so that she could easily tank the AoE special units. And if you don't have them, then you could still run Breath of Life in her slot C, and Firm Counter Curb is also an option. Legendary Micaiah was always a bit awkward with her weapon, and her weapon refine tries to fix that and gives her a lot of the useful effects. So because she's Micaiah, she has got the effective damage against armors and cavaliers, and she also has +3 attack. And now with the weapon refine, she's able to have +17 attack and resistance and +16 speed and defense. So I'm adding up the extra stats that you get based on a resistance, and getting up to visible 60 resistance is not going to be all that hard for any kind of Legendary Micaiah. So you're going to be able to get these many stats, but if you have lower invested Micaiah who doesn't have as much resistance, then it is going to be 1 or 2 points lower. She also has the guaranteed follow-up attack, and now she has got the full HP Desperation. Previously she had Desperation 2, which was really weird, but now by having this full HP Desperation, she becomes a really good Lin Ring user, as she could attack from a distance and try and kill the armors that do not have Hardy Bearing or really any kind of tank. And now she has got the slaying effect, so she's got -1 special cooldown, and she also has the null attack resistance debuffs, so she doesn't really need to run anything like a Unity skill, for example. And she also gets the true damage based on 20% of her resistance, which is extremely helpful for nuking, and it is the bare minimum you need on a unit like this who's trying to kill the very bulky armor units that have so much flat damage reduction. She also has the passive 50% damage reduction piercing, which does make sense because she's not going to be able to run any other slot B scale for doing that. So overall, this weapon refine is decent, and even her remix is pretty decent. She does take a bit of inspiration from Attune Micaiah, and on foes and on the foes that are in 2 spaces of them, you basically inflict the -7 Omni Chill debuffs, but instead of inflicting the status that Attune Micaiah does, we have got Legendary Micaiah inflicting the Sabotage status and the Panic status. So that can be a bit different, and it doesn't really have an overlap with a ploy skill. So at higher investments, you could definitely take advantage of it. And these kinds of debuffs are going to be helping Micaiah quite a lot in nuking. She also inflicts -5 attack speed and resistance debuff on the foe in the combat. And she basically has a better speed resistance sabotage plus, I would say, because she takes the highest total debuffs among the target and foes within 2 spaces of the target. So it's a bit different, and because of it, she's able to inflict insane amounts of speed and resistance debuffs. So Legendary Micaiah is quite fast, and a lot faster than you think for such a slow unit after her remix, and a big part of it is this effect. So this, along with the guaranteed follow-up attack in her weapon, is going to be helping you bypass any kind of follow-up denial effect on many of the armor units that are definitely not going to be as fast as her most of the time, unless we're talking about the specific very fast armors. But even then, against them, you could try and pair her up with a dual strike or triangle attack unit and get the brave hits and then quad attack the enemy if they don't have Hardy Bearing. She also gets 30% damage reduction, which is going to be completely pierceable, so it's not really much, and most of the time if Legendary Micaiah is getting hit, then likely she is going to be dying with this kind of damage reduction. And then she finally has Null Guard, so this is also helpful because in case you get scowled, you can at least trigger your special on your second attack because of the Desperation effect. So having Null Guard in this is really nice, and it also helps when you're trying to brute force against any kind of armor with dual strike or triangle attack support. So overall, Legendary Micaiah gets a lot better, definitely a lot better than what she was before. She was in a really awkward spot, but at least now she has found her footing, and she's going to be able to absolutely destroy any kind of armor that doesn't have Hardy Bearing. And even, if they have Hardy Bearing, you can try and support her accordingly, and she herself is a really good Lin Ring user. But the thing is that the bar for a Micaiah is set so high now because of Attune Micaiah that, this kind of weapon refine is just decent and not that insane. Even though you're able to kill a lot of meta armors right now, a lot of the competent ones are going to be running Hardy Bearing, which is going to be stopping the Desperation playstyle of Legendary Micaiah, so you always have to watch out for that if you take her into the competitive game modes. So if you're going to be using her on a super budget, then you can just keep the base kit. She now has Time Pulse 4 as the remix skill, which is really good because she has got the -1 special cooldown in her weapon. So you could just run Glimmer and then pre-charge it and nuke something with the Emblem Lin Ring, and you can easily nuke an armor unit with the Desperation effect. A finish skill is nice in the Sacred Seal so that you could get some true damage, and she does want to stack her attack and resistance, as the true damage she gets is going to be scaling off of her resistance. And if you're trying to change Fury for her, which you should be because she has an HP threshold in her Refine, then you could just run attack resistance finish. That's a pretty decent scale, giving you the true damage, and it goes really well with pre-charging Glimmer with Time Pulse and then nuking something with it. Lin Ring is absolutely going to be her best Emblem ring right now. Attune Micaiah is also always using that. But if you don't want to use Lin Ring, then you could always mix it up with Sacred Ring. But if you're trying to brute force your way through many of the armors that may have hardy bearing, then you would need to run Astra. Now, I know it sounds really strange for the people that don't really play competitive a lot, but Astra is the special that Micaiah runs nowadays. Even Attune Micaiah, you need that to kill a lot of the armors nowadays. So they've got so much flat damage reduction in bulk that you need the insane damage output from this, and Legendary Micaiah is able to do it a lot more easily than Attune Micaiah because she is an infantry unit, so she could run Creation Pulse and take advantage of the pulse effects basically. So you're able to run Creation Pulse really easily on her because she inflicts the two distinct status with her slot B in Panic and Sabotage, and that also activates the condition of Slime Mirror, so you also get the true damage out of it, and that is also really strong for getting a lot of stats and getting the true damage and the damage output. And with Creation Pulse and another pulse effect from an ally, you can trigger Astra on your first attack. So giving her the external pulse support is going to be helpful. You could even give any kind of special jump support from someone like Thor, for example, and that can also stack up with Creation Pulse and immediately let you trigger Astra. So that is one of the ways of brute forcing through the armors that may just be way too bulky, and it's also really fun to use the special. Another way of brute forcing with Astra is by using Pulse Ploy of Rune. So Pulse Ploy is the perfect slotsy skill for her in my opinion because it goes really well with the debuffs of her Prescience. It gives you more support to your allies, and for Micaiah herself, it lets you pre-charge your Astra. So you're not going to be able to use your Lin Ring on turn 1, but with Pulse Ploy and again another pulse support from an ally, you're going to be able to trigger Astra on the second turn, which is going to be doing a lot of damage. And Crystalline Water is something you need to run when we're running Pulse Ploy so that you could debuff the enemies. And having more visible resistance is also not that bad because it does give her slightly more stats, very slightly because of the weapon, and there is a bit of an overlap with the null debuffs of her weapon and Crystalline Water, but Crystalline Water also gets rid of the panic for her. So it still has its usage, and just investing in her attack and resistance is going to be working well with this build. And because she's a legendary unit, if you want to use her in arena, then Flare is going to be the special that you can try and run as a high scoring special. And still Pulse Ploy is really good in arena, as by turn 2 when your ring is available to use, you will have your Flare pre-charged, so you could just nuke an enemy. For fully capitalizing her offensive potential, you could try and run her with dual strike or triangle attack units, and you could even try and run her with Fallen Maria or Ymir for the miracle in case the hardy bearing armors are able to kill you, so the miracle of them is going to be saving, and then you get your guaranteed follow-up attack and hit them. So those two are the good support units for any kind of Lin Ring user. Halloween Xane was the 4-star focus unit, which a lot of people did get as a one-off copy because he could just copy the stats from his allies, and that was really fun, and you didn't really need any kind of merges for it. So he has got a pretty nice weapon refined now. He has got the copying of stats from his allies, but now he could do it from 3 spaces. So basically the highest stats of the allies in 3 spaces is going to be subtracted with Xane's stats, and then he's going to be getting extra stats in the combat. And he has got the first unconditional close counter effect in his weapon. Shaman did have a conditional close counter, so here the close counter is always going to be active for Xane, which is not only good for tanking any kind of melee unit, but you also get to counter against the Lin Ring users because of having this skill. And then you have got the HP plus 5, and now with the Refine he's able to get plus 10 to all of his stats. He also gets true damage based on 20% of his speed, which you're going to be stacking a lot of the times. And then he has got the pure supportive effect, which he's going to be getting no part of. So at sort of both phases, only to his allies in 3 spaces, he's going to be giving them +6 buff to all of their stats so that he could copy their stats, and he also gives them the Null Panic and the Hexblade status. So even if you don't use Halloween Xane for his own combat, you could just use this effect for the support if you're running any kind of bonus doubler type of unit. So this is really good for easily getting all of the buffs and also getting Null Panic at the same time. And the range of this buff is 3 spaces, which is a lot better than many of the buffing units that we have got in the game. He also gets flat damage reduction on foes' first attacks, including the brave hits, depending on the greater of his defense or resistance. So whichever one is higher is going to be deciding his flat damage reduction. So that again goes really well with Lego's friend for tanking, and he does have close counter as well. And then finally he has got the scowl effect, which normally these kinds of infantry mages are not going to be having access to. So this can make him quite bulky and go with his playstyle of copying a ton of stats from his allies, just stacking up the flat damage reduction, and then being really tanky and killing the enemy. As a rule of thumb, his own stats don't really matter much outside of his HP, so you don't really need any kind of merges, a lot of dragon flowers or stuff like that on him. You just need to have the HP and the plus HP IV, and you also don't need any kind of sacred seals that can boost his visible stats. And because his stats don't matter, and because he has got a relatively low defense, he can easily be a bait unit for Lorather to just put the assigned decoy status on. But he's going to be playing a prank on Lorather because guess what? He's not as frail as he is assumed to be, because he's going to be copying the stats from his allies in 3 spaces. And that way he's going to be really bulky when his Far Savior is going to be triggering against the enemy. So you could easily use him as an anti-Lorather tech in Ether Raids and also in Summoner Duels, which makes him quite unique. And that's why, again, you don't really need to invest in him really heavily, because you want to keep his defense stat as low as possible so that he is the one who gets hit by the assigned decoy status. And because he's an infantry unit, he can easily run Null Counter Disrupt Echo. If you're using him on super budget, he's still worth refining because, again, he functions as a pretty nice buff bot, and you could just stack up his HP and make him use Sudden Panic and Infantry Pulse. So both of these things can be helpful for just giving the support to your allies, and if it comes to that, he can also tank in the combat. Emblemite Ring could be run so that he can have some unpierceable damage reduction, but at this kind of absolute low investment, he's able to still put in work with skills like these. But if you're trying to give him some better fodder, then you could try and fodder Brave Soren from the Divine Codes. So Magical Null Follow-Up is really good for him because he doesn't want to get doubled. He only gets the flat damage reduction on the first attack of the enemy, and you also want to get the damage reduction piercing with him. It is also necessary, and because he doesn't have a minus and special cooldown weapon, he could just run Time Pulse 4. Flare is also really helpful so that he could heal up the HP, and the finish kill does work in 3 spaces of your allies, so it goes really well with his weapon. And you also get some healing and true damage, and you could just run another finish kill as a Sacred Seal. You could even run Attack Speed Unity on him because, again, he doesn't really care much about his own stats. As long as he's getting debuffed, he's going to be getting the in-combat stats. And at max investment, you want to run Lego's Friend on him. That is his best lot B skill because it lets him stack up the flat damage reduction and be really bulky while having low defense and getting targeted by Lorather and his assigned decoy. So it is needed, and you also get the full damage reduction piercing, and depending on the allies that you've got, you're going to be getting the flat damage reduction and true damage based on their defense or resistance. And any kind of boost skill could be used in his slot A because it gives him the extra HP, and that is the stat that matters for him. And it also gives him the guard effect, so you could even run a Deluge boost, but it is only on Duo Fiorm. So Firestorm boost can work out, and he doesn't have Null Follow-Up in his kit, so you could just run that in the slot C and also give that out to your allies so he can also support at the same time. And Tempo Sacred Seal is actually pretty fun on him with a boost skill because the boost skill has got the guard effect, then you take advantage of the defensive tempo effect, and he has got the scowl effect in his weapon. So you're going to be making it extremely hard for your enemy to trigger any kind of special against him. And he also is fast, and he's able to have null follow-up effect, so they're not going to be getting any kind of guaranteed follow-up attack. And as I was talking before, he could easily be a Lerather bait, and that's why having the Null Counter Disrupt Echo skill is really good for him if he can afford to do that. That just works really well with the game plan. And he could even run Bonus Doubler 4, but only for the extra stats. So you're not going to be buffing him up, and you're going to be using the tier 4 Bonus Doublers effect, where it copies the visible buffs from the allies near you, and you can get plus 10 to all of your stats because you do buff your allies. And Breath of Life also helps him tank better, but he is still going to be folding to any kind of AoE special because that is going to be taking his visible defense, which is really low. So despite Breath of Life, you need to watch out for any kind of AoE special. And because he doesn't have a -1 special cooldown weapon, he's able to use Flare with Lagoose Friend as a 3 cooldown special. So it works out for him. And again, Null Counter Disrupt Echo is really good. And finally, you could also use him with the new and shiny skill and perfect attack speed that we have got. You're going to be staying near your allies, so that works out. And then you get the null follow-up effect out of it. So you don't really need to run that in the slot C or give him that kind of support. And if you're going to be using him in Summoner Duels as a Lerather bait, then you could also try and run Firm Canto Curb on him. That is one of these skills that can help you prevent the enemy from running away. But if you're using him outside of Summoner Duels, then you could also run Infantry Pulse 4 for utilizing his HP. Ronan out of nowhere gets a weapon refine that is as big as a Thesis, and he is a much better unit now, which no one really expected. So his Indignant Bow did have the +3 resistance, and now it also has the slaying effect. So something like Curved Shot becomes a 1 cooldown special that he could immediately trigger, and triggering specials is going to be really important. He also has the Null Hexblade effect, which just stops any kind of adaptive damage, which means that he has no problem taking on any kind of dragons with his high resistance. And with this weapon refine, he's able to get +11 attack, defense, and resistance in combat, and also +10 speed in the combat. And he also has the null attack speed and resistance debuff. So again, you don't really need any kind of unity skill. And he also has dull attack speed, so you don't really need any kind of lull skill either. And then he gets true damage based on 20% of his resistance. And the next part is the craziest one. He gets special damage equal to 150% of his resistance instead of his attack. So this is similar to Attuned Chimera's Sandstorm, but it's Snowstorm for Ronan here. And if you have used Attuned Chimera, then you know how insane and absurd this effect is, because you can easily go into like triple-digit damage territory with this kind of effect. So Ronan is going to be no different, and that's why you should be running any kind of skill that can make sure that he could trigger his special and nuke the enemy. So he's fantastic now as a nuke and even as a mixed phase unit. So he has got the effects for both phases, but he also gives out the support as a drive support to the allies in 3 spaces. So he gives out +5 attack speed and resistance, the null guard effect so that they can trigger their specials easily as well, and 7 flat damage reduction on their first attacks, including the brave hits. So he's kind of trying to be Setet, but still Setet is a lot better because of being a flying unit. But having this 3 space range does mean that you can avoid things like Lerather's assigned decoy and support your tank from a distance. So its range is appreciated, and the flat damage reduction is always going to be helping any kind of tank. And then he gets Null Guard for himself as well, so he can trigger like double specials in that same combat and kill the enemy with his ridiculous Snowstorm. And he has got the Preempt Pulse effect, so he's able to get the special jump, which also makes it easy to trigger something like Curve Shot immediately. And finally, he gets 2 instances of flat damage reduction. 10 flat damage reduction against the regular hits, and extra 10 flat damage reduction against the specials. And in both of the instances, he gets the AoE damage reduction as well, which is just ridiculous. So this kind of flat damage reduction with everything else that he has got is going to be helping him survive the enemy's counterattack, and then hopefully nuke them with another special with his Snowstorm. And at max investment and high investment, he could even try and tank things. Overall, Ronan is going to be making a lot of people regret that they foddered him back in the old days, because even a single copy of him at low investment is so good because of the Snowstorm that he has got in his weapon, and that is the truly ridiculous part. And you could even say that he is the winner of this weapon refinery patch. And that is just a crazy thing if you told someone that like a week ago. So if you're trying to build him up, even with like low investment, he's still going to be able to hit really hard and kill things that even your high investment units may struggle to kill because of the snowstorm. So you could just try and give him a speed resistance finish from Yulia and run a finish Sacred Seal. He is one of the few units that wants to run any kind of skill that can give him resistance. So instead of focusing on attack and speed, you want to focus on speed and resistance, or even attack and resistance if you're at lower investment. And you could just run Emblem Sigurd Ring to be authentic with the +1 movement, and this way you can get the Canto. And you can also run Special Spiral 3, which is in the Divine Codes. And because of the Preempt Pulse in his weapon, he's going to be triggering Iceberg, and then he can loop it with Special Spiral. And because of the Preempt Pulse in his weapon, even if he faces any kind of Scal enemy, it is going to be offsetting it, and you're still going to be able to nuke them with the Iceberg. And he does have Null Hexblade, so any kind of dragon is not really going to be able to easily kill him or do a lot of damage. At a little bit of high investment, if you have some rearmed Ophilias lying around, then you could give him Special Spiral 4, which gives him the full damage reduction piercing on his special triggers. And you could also use Time Pulse 3 just to, pre-charge Glacies. And with his Preempt Pulse and Special Spiral 4, you're going to be able to trigger Glacies, and then you stack up a bit of true damage with the Spiral and the finish skills. So he can hit extremely hard when stacking up resistance with his Refine. And the more optimal way of using him is definitely going to be with Curved Shot. So with Curved Shot, you could try and be a Lin Ring nuke, and that's the main difference between him and Attune Chimera. So Curved Shot is going to be giving you the unpierceable damage reduction. He does lag the null follow-up effect and also the damage reduction piercing, and physical null follow-up is the perfect skill that he could run. He's one of the few units that could, just run speed resistance finish 4. And if you have an extra Fibale, then you could even run him with speed resistance Hexblade. So he's the only unit who could possibly want it. And he could run Time Pulse in his slot C. It might seem a bit weird because he has got the Preempt Pulse, but again, this is to make sure that you don't get affected by the Hush Spectrum or any kind of Scal effect. So even if he's going to be getting affected by the Scal effect, Time Pulse is going to be pre-charging the special, and then Preempt Pulse is going to be offsetting the Scal. So you're still going to be triggering Curved Shot, and because he has got Null Guard in his weapon, he's going to be triggering another Curved Shot if the enemy survives. So Curved Shot as a special is amazing on Ronan for his survival and for also nuking with his insane damage output. Because Ronan gives you the flat damage reduction support with his Refine, he could even be used as a pure support unit or a semi-support unit in Aether Raid's offense. So in the light season, he could try and stack up his resistance with Crystalline Water and then debuff the enemy with the Discord skill that he could have gotten at the same time from Rearm Marianne, and you could also run a Ploy skill, and then on turn 2 with the safety fence you can snipe something with his Curved Shot and then support the tank, and they can tank the remaining units, and he can be 3 spaces away while still debuffing the enemies. So it is definitely something that is possible with him, and he is an infantry unit, so he has got a lot of infantry only skills, and he also has the resistance to make use of a lot of supportive skills. But still, overall, Setet is still going to be a bit better as a support because of being a flying unit. And then you could also run the fodder from Attuned Bridget that you could try and get. This gives him the Tempo Echo, which provides him with the damage reduction piercing that he is lacking. The Null Guard effect is going to be overlapping a bit, but honestly it's fine. You get to run Creation Pulse and Perfect Attack Speed from Bridget, and Perfect Attack Speed also gives him the full null follow-up, and with the Discord skill you could try and get some true damage and also a negative status for the Creation Pulse activation, and this way you can stack up these special jumps with Creation Pulse and his weapon and trigger Glacies and do a lot of damage. And at max investment, if you're trying to use him as a mixed phase tanky archer, then you could try and use Lagoose Friend, and Pulse Ploy is also an option so that you could try and charge up Glacies and trigger Glacies twice in a single round of combat and completely pierce the damage reduction of the enemy because of Lagoose Friend. So you could stack up the flat damage reduction with it, and you could also try and use his resistance to run any kind of ploy skill. Like I said, I do like Pulse Ploy a lot better on him because you can just trigger double Glacies with all of the special jumps and everything. So it is definitely a fantastic option for him Time Pulse Echo could also be run, but Null Counter Disrupt Echo is also an option. And keep in mind, with Lagoo's Friend, you will need to run Glacies. You cannot use Iceberg or Curve Shot. It is not going to be working with his weapon because now he has got the minus and special cooldown weapon. So Glacies not only scales off the resistance, but also works with Lagoo's Friend. Sonia tries to follow the footsteps of Nurgle with his weapon refine, so she has got Fimble, Vetter, Morn as her preferred weapon now. This gives her minus 12 attack and resistance debuff on the foe in the combat, and she also gets the much needed true damage based on 20% of her resistance. She also gets 7 flat damage reduction on foes' first attacks, including the brave hits. So this kind of flat damage reduction is good with her mixed bulk, but I wish that she got something better or like more flat damage reduction, because this is not enough nowadays to tank things. But still, the 7 flat damage reduction can also be used productively. She also has the guard effect in this weapon, which doesn't mean much nowadays as we've got so much null guard and special jumping. And then to herself and her support partner in 2 spaces, or if there's no support partner, then to the highest attack ally in 2 spaces, she's able to give out the +6 attack and resistance buff, the Essence Drain status of Nurgle, and bonus doubler status as well. So she is basically a free-to-play Nurgle, which is not the worst thing. It can definitely be really helpful in a lot of the game modes, even though not everyone is able to have the Essence Drain. I mean, if you run Citrine, then you're able to give that to everyone. But still, even without it, she's able to give this out to her support partner, who's going to be another unit who may be really good with a Lin Ring. And she herself can also try and use the Lin Ring to steal the status effects from really far away. And you could also try and make it so that all of your allies have got the same attack stats, so you can have the attack matching, and then all of them get the Essence Drain and bonus doubler status. So this is really fun, and she also takes advantage of it, and she has got the guaranteed follow-up attack now, so with any kind of slot B skill, she's going to be able to function. And then finally, she gets the 7 HP healing after the combat. So the healing from Essence Drain and this kind of healing is going to be keeping her healthy. So overall, this is a pretty decent weapon refine. Like I said, I would have liked a bit more flat damage reduction because the nukes nowadays hit really hard. But still, if you did invest in her, then she's going to be having a really good time now with this weapon refine and also being unique. So I would only suggest building her up if you're going to be plus and merging her. And if you're trying to update her, then again, Rearmed Ophelia can come in handy. So you could try and run her with Special Spiral 4 for the full damage reduction piercing, and Looping Iceberg with Time Pulse 4, so it does stack. And then you could just run the Finish Scale for the true damage and also for a little bit of healing. And like I said before, Emblem Lin Ring is amazing on Nurgle for stealing the status, but now you could also do it with Sonia. It's just that you need to watch out for the dosage status of New Year and Mythic Nidhogre, which is going to be blocking any kind of stealing, and that is going to be a bit more annoying. Her best slotty skill is Close Bonus Doubler, which can be found on Nurgle, so you could also take the Special Spiral and Defense Res Oath at the same time. And Defense Res Oath is also good because she gets the visible defense buff and she does have the bonus doubler, and then she's running Close Bonus Doubler, so all of that does help. And Flare could be run so that you could try and get the healing, and Emblem Ike Ring could also be useful defensively for getting some unpierceable damage reduction, and you can pretty much retaliate back with Flare once the Special Spiral is charged up, because it is going to be a 1 cooldown special. And you could even run Bonus Doubler as the Sacred Seal, but you will have to watch out for any kind of dull all effect or panic effects. And you could also get Close Bonus Doubler from Arlen. He also gives you attack resistance tempo 4 at the same time, and that is a pretty nice skill for her because it makes it so that with her guard effect, it is going to be making it a lot harder for the enemy to charge their special. And she can also run a Plet Scale so that she could retaliate back with Flare. So the special charges out of the Plet Scale and the defense buff is going to be extremely useful to her. Emblem Marth is going to be needed so that it could be a 2 cooldown special that it can always retaliate back with. And the best build for her defensively is going to be Lagoo's Friend, like it is for so many of these units, because there's no other better option that can give you, the flat damage reduction for the tanking. So you could run this. You also get the full damage reduction piercing with it. And you could also run Breath of Life because Sonia's defense is pretty high for a mage, and she also has good HP, so this can help her quite a lot with the self-sustain and for just scaling. But if you already have it on some other ally, then you could even try and run Odd Defense Wave for getting its full tempo effect. That is also helpful for getting the defense buff with her bonus doubler playstyle. And if you think the Lagoose Friend builds are a bit boring, you could also try the offensive route with Attune Bridget's fodder. So you could run Tempo Echo, which is going to be giving you the tempo effect and the damage reduction piercing. So you could run other slot B skills like the Attack Resistance Discord skill, which can give you the true damage based on your resistance. And this makes her hit harder. And Crystalline Water could be used, but I don't think we want to reduce her defense, so that's why Stronghold could be an option that can also give you the cleansing. And then you could also run Pulse Up Ploy for just ploying the enemies, and also for pre-charging Iceberg, which you could then use with Emblem Lin Ring to nuke the enemies. Lex gets a refine to his dual phase Brave Axe, and now it does have the penalty of -5 speed and resistance, but he gets +5 HP, +6 attack, and +6 defense as the visible stats. So he pretty much has a 17 might dual phase brave weapon, which is not bad. He also gets guaranteed follow-up attack, so quad attacking enemies is going to be a bit easier. He also gets +6 attack and defense into combat, and now he gets true damage based on 15% of his defense, excluding the AoE specials. So this is really good with a dual phase brave weapon for just having better damage output. He also gets special cooldown charge +1 per attack, which is not all that easy for a Cavalier to get. So with a brave weapon, this is also helpful. It's just that getting the Null Guard or the tempo effect as a Cavalier is going to be a bit more annoying. And then finally, he has got the 7 HP healing after the combat. So the weapon description is not that long, but that doesn't mean that this weapon refine is bad in my opinion. It's really hard to mess up these kinds of dual phase brave weapons because they are still brave weapons, and you could just stack up so much true damage nowadays that you can still make them work out. And this is on a Cavalier who has got the special charges effect so that he can trigger his specials easily. He does have some drawbacks though. He doesn't have -1 special cooldown, no Null Guard, no extra movement, no canto, nothing like that. So all of that is something you'll need to work out with. But I don't think this is the worst weapon refine. This is not the most insane and greatest weapon refine. Is this alright? But still, even an alright weapon refine with a dual phase brave weapon is still going to be helping you as a unit that you can try and plus emerge from the 3-star 4-star pool. If you're going to be trying to update him on a medium budget, then you can at least try and run him with attack defense clash 4 so that he could get the debuff neutralization, and then Emblem Cigarette Ring is going to be really good for him so that he could get the +1 movement and also, be a lot more offensive. The flat Canto 3 out of it is also helpful because he doesn't have any other Canto in his weapon. So this is going to be helpful. And then Lull Attack Defense is a decent skill you could try and run from the Divine Codes. Panic Smoke 4 is also something we have got in the Ephemera manuals. So all of these skills could be something that you could run on him if you don't have the other expensive options. And Attack Defense Clash as the Sacred Seal is going to be helping you stack up his attack. And you should definitely focus on his attack and defense with the boons. And if you have better fodder, then you could run him with Attack Defense XL. And Odd Defense Wave, in my opinion, is the best Lotsy skill for him because it gives him the full tempo effect, and that is so good with the special charges of his weapon. So that means that if you run Emblem Marth with Gale Force, you're going to be triggering Gale Force on your brave hits. You don't even need to quad attack. So you could try and get the Canto instead from the Slot B skill with Speed Defense Neotrace. We don't really have the attack defense version of it, but you still get the 7 true damage out of it, which is really helpful. And unfortunately, Cavaliers don't have good attune skills, so Deathblow Echo is pretty much the only thing you could try and use with this kind of brave weapon. You can also run him with Flow Guard 4, so Attack Defense XL is also good for him as it gives him the flat damage reduction, and then Flow Guard gives you the guard effect and the scowl effect, and also the null follow-up, which is helpful for quad attacking and also for surviving. And even Attack Wave N is also an option you could run on him because it does give him the true damage, and again, any kind of true damage is good for him with this kind of weapon. You could also run No Quarter as a special because he also lacks the damage reduction piercing, so this is his main way of piercing it. Emblem Cigarette Ring should always be run unless we get some kind of Neotrace Echo in the future, and this is an old and outdated skill, but it still works out for him. So Gambit could be run so that he could get the true damage and the damage reduction out of it. all of the damage reduction you get out of it is completely pierceable, so it's a bit inferior. But reopening, it doesn't really work that well with Lex because he has got the Brave effect, so it is only going to be giving you 10% of your defense as the true damage and flat damage reduction. So Gambit is an option if you have it in your barracks. With Ether, you could run it, and then you could try and charge it up with the special charges of his weapon, and also from the Null Guard with Odd Defense Wave. And Mystic Boost Sacred Seal can be run on him because there are a lot of Hexblade effects out there, so his resistance is incredibly low and it can help him prevent getting blown up by those units. So it's also a Sacred Seal that he could run even though it doesn't really give you any kind of extra attack. And the best build for Lex is by far with Momentum, which should not be a surprise because he's a Cavalier, so not only gives him the true damage but also the special jumps, and that is really powerful with the special charges of his weapon. This means that with the Null Guard of the Odd Defense Wave, you're able to trigger Ignis and hit extremely hard because of Momentum. So if you're trying to have the best Lex possible, you need an Emblem Sigurd on your hand so that you could have this kind of build. And then Mercing Wing Echo, I guess, could also be run as an attune skill if you don't want to run Deathblow Echo for the extra attack. And Ignis is still going to be giving you better damage output compared to No Quarter for a build like this, as it is going to be scaling off of his defense. Selena becomes blazing fast with her Weapon Refine, and Tome of Storms did give her +3 speed and had Null follow-up, but now with this Refine, she's able to get about 21 attack and speed in the combat. It depends on 15% of her visible speed, but she should be able to easily get this kind of attack and speed at decent investment. And she also has dealt speed resistance, so any of those visible buffs of the enemies is not going to be a problem. And a lot of people, when she came out, did used to run her with Wind Sweep or Water Sweep, but now she just gets the Speed Sweep effect, so that is amazing. And she also gets Canto 1, which is also amazing as a Cavalier, as you don't really need to run any kind of Fortress Echo on her, and you could also function a lot better with the Emblem Lin Ring. And on the closest foes and in foes in 2 spaces, she's going to be debuffing them for -7 speed and resistance, and also the exposure status, which is going to be giving you the true damage. And she gets true damage out of this weapon as well, based on 20% of her speed. So she might not really seem all that insane, but she does have a lot of speed with all of these effects. And having the Null follow-up, the Speed Sweep, the Canto, all are really useful effects with Emblem Lin Ring. So that is one of the things that she can try and do a lot better. Minus some special cooldown is definitely something major that she is missing, unfortunately. And a lot of times she's not going to be having access to it, as she would prefer to run the other Emblem Rings. On super budget, you could just try and run Poison Strike and Savage Blow to chip down the enemies using her sweep effect from a distance using the Emblem Lin Ring. So that could be done, and you could also just keep her Life and Death 4 and run her with Moonbow. And Blade Session could be run, as always, for maximizing your offenses. But if you have some fodder from like Gulvig or something, then you could try and run Flared Sparrow and Occultist Strike. So this way you could set up the terrain from far away, and you also get the true damage out of Occultist Strike. That is more valuable than the pre-combat damage out of it, and Failed Smoke does combo up pretty well with it. So the pre-combat damage has fallen off heavily, but if you don't really have the other expensive options, then this is at least something you could try and run. She doesn't really have any kind of damage reduction piercing, and that's why I think that her best lobby skill is Resonance 4. At max investment, she does reach enough HP to make the full use out of it, but if she is any lower investment, then you would need to run the Squad A Sacred Seal for giving her the extra HP, and you could just try and run Verge of Death for getting its cleansing, and you could also run Inside Attack Speed. Inside Attack Speed is not the best with Emblem Lin Ring when you're just near your allies, so if you're trying to run any other Emblem Ring, then it could be helpful. Like Marth Ring could be run for a 1 cooldown Glimmer, and then you could even run Life and Death, and keep in mind that she can get more speed depending on her visible speed stat. So all of this can help her, even though she's not going to be AoE nuking or anything like that. She doesn't really get the true damage to her AoE specials, unfortunately. And then finally, her best max investment build is going to be utilizing Ninja Tharja and her Slash the Sparrow along with Resonance 4. And Panic Smoke is a really good slot to scale with the Emblem Lin Ring, as you could give the foe penalty doubler effect to all of your teammates. So that can be run, and because she can have the null follow-up in her weapon, you could even give her the dual strike or triangle attack support and she'll quad attack the enemy. And you can also get the true damage on every single hit with Slice the Sparrow, and again Resonance is going to be giving you the piercing and also the true damage. So all of the true damage stacking is going to be helping Selena hit much harder, and because she doesn't need Fortress Echo right now, I guess Fleeting Echo is something you can use just for getting a little bit of extra speed and nothing really else. This batch had some amazing and unexpected weapon refines, and I hope you all enjoyed. I want to thank all of my team members for their constant support, and you can click the link on the screen right now to check out my breakdown of the Emblem Lin Ring, and make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because YouTube sub boxes are about as functional when Larathar sees Halloween Xane just tanking his entire team. So that's all, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.